For 20 years, every single day for Eleanor Vance had been a shade of gray. Her sprawling mansion felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum, each silent room a monument to a joy that had been stolen away. But then, it happened. In a simple diner, sitting in a worn vinyl booth that smelled of coffee and fried onions, a splash of color returned to her world. It came in the form of a young waitress with a weary but gentle smile, and eyes that held the ghost of a memory. Eleanor's hand trembled, a heavy silver spoon clattering against her saucer. For 2 decades, her heart had beaten in a slow, mournful rhythm. Now, it was hammering against her ribs like a frantic drum. She stared, unable to breathe, unable to look away, as a name, a prayer, escaped her lips in a choked whisper. They say the world is full of echoes, moments that rhyme with the past. For most of us, it's just a fleeting feeling, a scent on the breeze, a half-remembered song. But what happens when the echo isn't a whisper, but a thunderclap? A deafening roar that shatters years of quiet sorrow. This is a story about a moment like that, when a forgotten past walked right into the present, and a single, whispered sentence changed everything. It's a story about the secrets we bury, and the love that simply refuses to stay buried with them. Lily. The name felt like a ghost on her tongue, a word she hadn't dared to speak aloud in 2 decades. The waitress, busy scribbling an order at the next table, didn't hear her. She was young, maybe in her mid-20s, with hair the color of dark honey pulled back in a simple ponytail. She moved with a tired efficiency, her shoulders slumped with a fatigue that seemed to go much deeper than a long shift. But it was her face, her eyes. They were a perfect, impossible mirror of the past. They were her daughter Sophia's eyes. Eleanor's friend Margaret placed a concerned hand on her arm. "Eleanor. Are you all right? You've gone white as a sheet." Eleanor couldn't speak. She just pointed with a trembling finger. "Look. Margaret, just look at that girl." Margaret squinted. "The waitress? What about her, dear? She's just a girl." "No," Eleanor breathed, her voice cracking. "She's so much more." Summoning a strength she didn't know she had, Eleanor sat up straight. The matriarch of the Vance fortune, a woman who could command boardrooms with a single glance, suddenly felt as fragile as a dried leaf. She waited, her heart pounding, until the waitress approached their table with a coffee pot. "More coffee, ladies?" the young woman asked, her voice soft and pleasant. "Yes, please," Eleanor managed, her eyes locked on the girl's face. "Anne, what is your name, my dear?" The waitress seemed a little taken aback by the old woman's intensity but smiled politely. "It's Amelia." Amelia. A simple, pretty name. But it wasn't the right one. "Amelia," Eleanor repeated, just to hear the sound of it. "That's a lovely name. Are you from around here?" Amelia hesitated, a guarded look flickering in her eyes. "I've moved around a bit. I guess you could say I'm not really from anywhere." She gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "Grew up in the system. You learned to pack light." The words, "the system," struck Eleanor like a physical blow. Foster care. An orphan. Her mind raced, a storm of impossible hope and crushing fear. As Amelia leaned in to pour the coffee, her sleeve hitched up. And there, just above her right eyebrow, was a tiny, pale scar, shaped like a perfect crescent moon. Eleanor gasped. She remembered that scar. Oh, God, she remembered it. Lily, only 5 years old, trying to climb the old oak tree in the garden. She'd slipped, and a branch had nicked her brow. Eleanor was the one who cleaned the cut, put a cartoon bandage on it, and kissed the tears away. It was her. It had to be. The universe couldn't be so cruel as to create 2 people, 2 decades apart, with the same honey-colored hair, the same gentle eyes, and the very same crescent moon scar. The diner, the clatter of plates, Margaret's worried chatter, it all faded to a dull roar. There was only this girl. This ghost. This miracle. Amelia straightened up, looking concerned. "Ma'am. Are you okay? Eleanor blinked, pulling herself back. Yes. Yes, I'm fine, dear. Just an old woman lost in thought. She fumbled in her purse, her hands shaking so badly she could barely open the clasp. She pulled out a crisp $100 bill and her business card. This is for you. Amelia's eyes widened. Ma'am, I can't, this is way too much. Nonsense, Eleanor said, her tone firm, the voice she used when she wouldn't be denied. She pressed the card into the girl's hand. My name is Eleanor Vance. I want you to call me. I may have an opportunity for you, something better than this. Please. Just call me. Amelia stared at the money, then the card, completely bewildered. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. As Amelia walked away, Eleanor watched her go, a single tear finally tracing a path down her cheek. Margaret was speechless. Eleanor, what on earth was that? What are you thinking? Eleanor turned to her, her eyes burning with a fire that had been put out 20 years ago. I'm thinking, she said, her voice trembling, that I may have just found my granddaughter. That night, sleep was impossible. Eleanor paced the vast, silent halls of her mansion, her slippers whispering on the marble floors. She found herself in the West Wing, in a room kept exactly as it was for 2 decades. Lily's room. The canopy bed with faded pink curtains, the stuffed animals on the shelf, the child's drawing of a smiling sun still taped to the wall. She ran a hand over a small, wooden rocking horse. The grief, a dull ache she had learned to live with, was suddenly sharp and piercing. She sank into an armchair, pulling a heavy photo album onto her lap. The pictures told the story. There was Sophia, her beautiful daughter, holding her newborn, Lily. There was Sophia's husband, Robert, lifting a laughing toddler onto his shoulders. And there were so many photos of Lily. Lily on her first birthday, face smeared with cake. Lily on the rocking horse in this very room. And there it was, Lily, age 5, with a fresh, crescent moon scar over her eyebrow, grinning proudly for the camera. The official story was seared into Eleanor's soul. A winding country road, slick with rain. A patch of black ice. Their car had skidded into a ravine and caught fire. They had identified the remains of Sophia and Robert, but of 5-year-old Lily, there was no trace. The investigators concluded she must have perished in the inferno, her small body consumed by the flames. She was declared missing, presumed dead. Eleanor had been forced to accept it, but a stubborn corner of her heart never truly did. How could a child just vanish? Her thoughts were interrupted by her son, Richard, and his wife, Clara. Mother? It's nearly 3 in the morning. What are you doing up? Richard asked, his voice a careful mix of concern and impatience. Eleanor didn't look up. I couldn't sleep. Clara glided into the room, her silk robe rustling. Darling, you shouldn't be in here. It only upsets you, she said, casting a disdainful look around the room. It's been 20 years. It's time to let it go. Eleanor's head snapped up. Let go. You want me to let go of my granddaughter? Richard sighed. That's not what Clara meant. We just worry. This fixation isn't healthy. A cold anger knotted in Eleanor's stomach. Their sympathy always felt so hollow. They had been jealous of Sophia, who was set to inherit control of the company. After the accident, Richard had gotten what he always wanted. I saw someone today, Eleanor said quietly, watching their faces. A young woman. A waitress. She looked just like Lily. Clara let out a small, sharp laugh. Oh, Mother Vance, please. You're seeing ghosts. It's your grief playing tricks on you. She had the scar, Eleanor pressed, her voice rising. The scar above her eye. Richard's face went hard. For just a heartbeat, something flashed in his eyes. It wasn't surprise. It looked a lot more like fear. A coincidence, mother, he said, his voice clipped and cold. The world is full of people with scars. You're just torturing yourself. Now, come on. Let's get you to bed. You need your rest. He tried to take her arm, but Eleanor pulled away. That flicker in his eye, the way he shut it down so quickly, it was all wrong. For the first time in 20 years, the official story of the accident began to unravel in her mind. Section 2. 2 days passed in an agony of silence. Eleanor checked her phone constantly, her heart leaping at every ring, only to sink again when it wasn't Amelia. She was starting to think she'd scared the girl off. But on the third evening, her phone finally rang with an unknown number. Hello? She answered, trying to keep the desperation out of her voice. Hello? Is this Mrs. Eleanor Vance? It was Amelia. Relief washed over Eleanor so powerfully she felt lightheaded. Yes, my dear, it is. I'm so glad you called. I'm sorry to call so late, Amelia said. My shift just ended. I wanted to thank you again. But I'm not sure what kind of opportunity you meant. I'd much rather discuss it in person, Eleanor said smoothly. Would you be free to join me for tea tomorrow? My driver can pick you up. There was a long pause. Tea? At your house? Amelia sounded flustered. Ma'am, I don't think. Please, Eleanor insisted, softening her tone. I assure you, it's just a conversation. I was impressed by your composure and kindness. Just an hour of your time. The unspoken fact of Amelia's financial struggles hung in the air. Finally, she agreed. The next day, Amelia arrived at the mansion looking completely overwhelmed. She stared up at the grand stone facade, clutching her worn purse like a shield. Eleanor greeted her at the door herself, wanting to put the girl at ease. She led her to a sun-drenched conservatory filled with orchids. For a while, Eleanor kept the conversation light, asking about Amelia's dreams. The girl wanted to be a pediatric nurse. She was intelligent and thoughtful, with a quiet strength that Eleanor admired. Finally, Eleanor gently steered the conversation. You mentioned you grew up in foster care. Forgive me for asking, but do you know anything about your birth parents? Amelia's smile vanished. Not really. My first clear memory is being at a children's home when I was about 5 or 6. They said I had some kind of amnesia from a trauma. I just get flashes. Like broken pieces of a dream. A woman's laugh. The smell of rain on hot pavement. Sometimes, a feeling of falling, and a fire. She shivered. I have nightmares about a fire. Eleanor's heart ached. This was her Lily. And your scar? She asked softly. Amelia touched her eyebrow. They said I got it in whatever accident happened before I was found. Taking a leap of faith, Eleanor handed her a small, silver-framed photo of her daughter, Sophia. This was my daughter, she said. Amelia took the frame. A look of deep confusion crossed her face. She looks familiar. It's strange. It feels like a dream I can't quite catch. At that exact moment, Richard and Clara walked in. Their timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. Mother, Richard said, his voice dripping with disapproval. What is this? I thought we discussed your flights of fancy. Clara's cold eyes swept over Amelia, making the girl shrink back. Richard, she's actually brought the waitress here. To our home. Amelia flushed and stood up. I should go. I'm sorry to have intruded. You are not intruding, Eleanor said sharply, standing as well. But the damage was done. Richard stepped closer, looming over Amelia. The butler will show you out. His tone was a final, cutting dismissal. Amelia glanced at Eleanor, her eyes filled with hurt and confusion, before turning and hurrying out. The moment she was gone, Richard's mask dropped. "What in God's name do you think you're doing?" he hissed. "Parading that nobody around? Filling her head with nonsense? Have you lost your mind?" "I have never been more sane," Eleanor shot back, her voice trembling with rage. "That girl is Lily. I know it in my bones." "You feel it?" Richard scoffed. "Feelings aren't facts, Mother. You're a lonely, grieving old woman projecting a fantasy onto a stranger. It's pathetic." His words were cruel, designed to make her doubt herself. But his sheer, visceral anger did the opposite. It solidified her suspicion into a cold, hard certainty. He wasn't trying to protect her. He was trying to protect a secret. "Get out," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Mother. Get out of my sight. Both of you." They left. Her heart ached for Amelia, but her resolve had hardened into steel. Her son was hiding something. That evening, she made a call to a man she hadn't spoken to in 20 years, Daniel Porter, the retired lead detective from Lily's case. Section 3. Daniel Porter looked older, but his eyes were just as sharp. He listened patiently as Eleanor recounted everything, the diner, the scar, Richard's violent reaction. He didn't dismiss her. He'd always been bothered by the Vance case. "We never found a body, Eleanor," he said, leaning forward. "In a fire that intense, you'd expect something. Bone fragments, teeth. We found nothing. It was always the biggest question mark." He paused. "It's been 20 years. Records get lost, people forget. It's a long shot, but let's see if we can turn your hope into a fact." He agreed to look into it, discreetly. Eleanor arranged for him to get the teacup Amelia had used, along with a DNA sample from herself. "This will prove a direct maternal link if she is who you think she is," Daniel said. "But we need more. We need to bridge that 20-year gap." The next week was torture. Eleanor sent Amelia a heartfelt apology with a generous check, explaining it was for the job opportunity her family had sabotaged. Amelia's reply was polite but distant. Eleanor knew she couldn't push until she had proof. Then Daniel called, his voice electric. "Eleanor, I found something, buried in an old witness file, misfiled. A statement from a night nurse at a rural clinic 50 miles from the crash site. I went and talked to her. She remembers that night." Eleanor held her breath. "She said a man came in, frantic, carrying a little girl with a bleeding head wound," Daniel continued. "He claimed he was her uncle, that her parents had abandoned her. Paid in cash, left a fake name and address. The clinic was swamped, and they never followed up properly. The girl was eventually turned over to Child Protective Services." "And the description?" Eleanor whispered. The nurse described the man. Early 30s, tall, well-dressed, dark hair. "The description is a perfect match for your son, Richard, back then." The world tilted. The blood drained from Eleanor's face. It wasn't just a lie. It was a betrayal of unimaginable cruelty. Richard. Her own son. "There's more," Daniel said grimly. "With a little help from your lawyers, we dug into some old financial records. The week after the accident, Richard made a single, large cash withdrawal from a personal offshore account. $50,000. Untraceable. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The car crash was an accident. But what came after, was a monstrous choice. The DNA results came back the next day. A 99.999% match. Amelia was her granddaughter. Armed with the truth, Eleanor felt an icy calm settle over her. She called a meeting in the Grand Library, a room that represented the history and legacy of the Vance family. Richard and Clara arrived, looking irritated. "Another family drama, Mother?" Richard began. "I have a business to run." "You have nothing to run," Eleanor said, her voice like glass. Not anymore. She gestured to the papers on the table beside her. This is a statement from a nurse who remembers a man bringing a 5-year-old girl with a crescent moon scar to her clinic the night my daughter died. A man who abandoned her there. Richard's face went chalk white. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. And this, Eleanor continued, her voice rising, is a DNA report. It confirms that the waitress you so cruelly dismissed, the girl named Amelia, is my granddaughter. It confirms she is Lily. Richard stammered, trying to form a denial, but the words wouldn't come. You were there, weren't you? Eleanor said, walking toward him. You got there before the police. The crash was an accident. But Lily was alive. No, Richard stammered. She was, the fire. Stop lying. Eleanor's voice was a roar. You saw your chance, didn't you? After years of being second best. Your sister was gone. The company, the power, it was all finally in your grasp. And the only thing in your way was a terrified 5-year-old girl. Tears streamed down Clara's face. Richard, don't. But it was too late. Richard broke. He sank into a chair, his head in his hands. I was so jealous, he whispered. Always. Dad always favored her. When I saw the crash. I saw her, Lily, crying by the side of the road. And this terrible thought just took root. I could fix it. I could have the life I deserved. I told myself she'd be better off. That it was a kindness. A kindness? Eleanor's voice filled with disgust. You stole her life. You stole her from me. You let me grieve for 20 years while you lived in this house, built on my pain. You are not my son. You are a monster. The confession hung in the air, ugly and irrevocable, rewriting the entire history of the Vance family. Section 4. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Eleanor cut Richard and Clara out of her life completely. They were expelled from the estate, struck from the company, their access to the family fortune severed. But Eleanor didn't have time to dwell on the betrayal. She had one more thing to do. She drove herself to the same modest diner and waited. When Amelia, Lily, finally emerged from her shift, Eleanor got out of the car. Amelia. The girl started. Mrs. Vance. What are you doing here? I came to apologize, Eleanor said. And, to talk. Will you come with me? Wary but intrigued, Amelia agreed. Eleanor drove them to a quiet park overlooking the city. They sat on a cold bench as Eleanor began to speak. She didn't talk about job opportunities. She told her about a little girl named Lily, about her laughter and her spirit. She told her about Sophia and Robert, and the life of love that was stolen. Then, she pulled out a small, velvet box. Inside was a delicate gold locket. This was my daughter's, Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. She opened it. On one side was a tiny photo of Sophia and Robert. On the other, a picture of a smiling baby. Amelia stared at the locket. As her fingers brushed against the cool metal, her eyes widened. I remember this, she whispered. A lullaby. A woman singing, holding this, her face contorted as fragmented images flooded her mind, a warm embrace, the scent of lavender, a man's deep laugh. Eleanor took a deep breath, and then she told her everything. The crash. The lie. Her son's betrayal. And finally, the DNA test. You survived, my dear, Eleanor said, her own tears flowing freely. You were taken. Your memory was lost, but you were never forgotten. Your name, it isn't Amelia. She took the girl's hands in hers. Your name is Lily. And I am your grandmother. The words hung in the cold night air. Lily stared at her, her face a mask of shock. She pulled her hands away, backing up. No. That's impossible. I grew up in foster homes. I'm nobody. You're mistaken. Look at me, Eleanor pleaded. Look at my eyes. They're your mother's eyes. Think of the scar. The locket. The truth is right there, inside you. Lily sank onto the bench, her head in her hands, ragged sobs shaking her body. It was too much. A lifetime of being nobody, and now this? A history, a family, a fortune, a tragedy. The flashes in her mind intensified, the fire, being carried, an angry voice, then nothing. Eleanor sat beside her, giving her space. After a long time, Lily looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. If this is true, she said, her voice hoarse, then my whole life has been a lie. It was, Eleanor said gently. A cruel, terrible lie. But it's over now. And I am here. Slowly, hesitantly, Lily reached out. Eleanor met her halfway, pulling her granddaughter into her arms. For the first time in 20 years, she held Lily. The small child she had lost was now a grown woman, but in that embrace, time collapsed. They clung to each other, two strangers bound by blood, their shared tears washing away 2 decades of pain. The long, gray silence was finally over. Section 5. The days that followed were a delicate dance. Moving into the Vance mansion was overwhelming for Lily, but Eleanor knew that healing wasn't about money. It was about giving her back her past. She started with Lily's childhood room, preserved like a time capsule. Lily stepped inside, and the phantom memories began to take shape. I remember being afraid of the dark, she whispered, touching the canopy bed. My mother. Sophia, she'd tell me the stars were tiny nightlights she turned on just for me. Eleanor then showed her Sophia's study. Lily spent hours there, poring over her mother's journals. She wasn't just learning about the mother she lost, she was meeting her. She discovered they shared the same goofy sense of humor, the same love for classic books. They took the hardest trip together, to the cemetery. On the grass between the headstones for Sophia and Robert, Lily placed a bouquet of white lilies. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad, she said, her voice thick but steady. It's me. I'm okay. I'm home. Eleanor stood beside her, a pillar of support. It was a moment of profound sorrow, but also of profound peace. Life found a new rhythm. The silent mansion was now filled with conversation and laughter. They baked cookies. They walked in the gardens. Eleanor began teaching Lily about the family business, and Lily, drawing from her own past, proposed a new initiative to fund programs for children in the foster care system. She was honoring her past while building a better future. One evening, Lily looked at Eleanor. I'll never get back the 20 years we lost, she said quietly. Sometimes the anger at what he did is overwhelming. Eleanor took her hand. No, we won't get that time back. And what Richard did is unforgivable. But we cannot live in the shadow of his crime. We have today, and all the tomorrows. The best revenge isn't hatred. It's happiness. A life well lived, filled with the love he tried to extinguish. Lily squeezed her grandmother's hand, a radiant smile spreading across her face. The ghost of a memory was gone, replaced by a living, breathing miracle. The gray had vanished from Eleanor's world. The inheritance Lily received wasn't just a name or a fortune, it was the unbreakable truth that she was, and always had been, loved. CTA and conclusion. In the end, some bonds are just too strong to be broken by greed or time. This story is a powerful reminder that truth has a way of finding its way to the light, and the love of a family can be the greatest inheritance of all. It shows us that hope can be found in the most unexpected places, even in a simple diner, in the eyes of a stranger who feels like home. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed everything? Share your stories in the comments below. We'd love to hear them. For more stories that touch the heart and remind us of the power of hope, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.